The nutrition, eating behavior, from birth to 1 year old, human infants nearly triple their weight and increase their length by 50%. Again, their size is increasing at a dramatic rate. Nutritionists recommend infants consume about 50 calories per pound for what they weigh. And what they're finding, and you probably are aware of this, is that infants are consuming way more junk food and fewer fruits and vegetables than are recommended by experts. By 6 months, 37% are eating snacks, and by 12 months, 25% of their daily energy is from those snacks. Additionally, 25% of 6 to 11-year-olds consumed 0 vegetables, not a single vegetable. And this can result in infants being overweight. They're defining this by the BMI. BMI is not perfect, especially for adults, but for kids, it's usually pretty accurate. And they consider overweight by the BMI standards to be between 85 and 95 percentile. And so here we have a percentage of overweight U.S. infants in 1980, 2000. And you'll see that there's been a pretty dramatic increase in each age category. Some of the reasons for this are going to be eating more things like French fries, the sweetened drinks, the desserts, and those things are definitely hard to keep away from a kid. That's the type of food that they like. And I mean, think about yourself. If you had the choice, that's probably what you would like to eat all day too, is French fries and drink Cokes and eat cakes. But you know the effects of that, and you have the prefrontal cortex, and so you're able to use reasoning skills and not eat that all day long. The kid doesn't have those type of reasoning skills, and so you have to provide that support for them and provide those reasoning skills for them, even though it's going to be very painful for everyone involved, because they are going to scream, they are going to have fits, and a lot of parenting is about doing what's either easy on one hand or what's right and what you know is right. And so what's easy is, yeah, here you want cakes, have your cakes. What's hard is to be like, no, you only have cakes, at special occasions, like your birthday. You only have cake then, but you can't have cake every day. And so, yeah, you'll have a lot of disagreements about that. And if you want to do what's right, you got to stand your ground, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but that's what you have to do. All right. Anyways, yes, and this starts when you are a kid. So if you're overweight as a kid, the chances of you being overweight as an adult are drastically increased. On breastfeeding, there is a lot of research that says that breastfeeding provides better nutrition and a number of other benefits compared to formula feeding. The World Health Organization recommends exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months, followed by continued breastfeeding as a complementary as other foods are introduced. The benefits include fewer infections, protection against wheezing, lower incidence of overweight and obesity, lowered risk of type 1 diabetes, and lower risk of SIDS. Also, the benefits of breastfeeding, there's some for the mother too, that include lower incidence of breast and ovarian cancer, possibly a lowered risk of type 2 diabetes. Women may also have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome in midlife. So there are some reasons, though, that you would not want to breastfeed. So if the mother is infected with HIV or some other infectious disease that could be transmitted through the milk, if she has TB, tuberculosis, or if she's taking any drug that wouldn't be safe for an infant. There are other situations where you might not be able to breastfeed. One of my nephews was somehow intolerant of my sister's breast milk, and so whenever he would ingest that, it would just run right through him. It just right out. And he was actually losing weight because he was drinking her breast milk, and so I had to switch him over to formula, and then he thrived and began to gain weight. So there are certain instances where breastfeeding is not going to be best for you, and you do need to make that decision on your own. There will be some people in your life that will be like, oh, you always have to breastfeed no matter what. And that's not true. You need to do what you and your doctor think are best, not what some of your friends on Facebook may say. Also, on all those benefits of breastfeeding, some of those things, and I probably need to have an entire lecture on this, the idea of how important SES is. And so a lot of those things, it's like, oh, these are benefits. Those benefits are also going to be seen with women that are higher in SES. So they were maybe already going to have those, like a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. They were already going to have that. And it just happens to be there's a correlation between higher SES and breastfeeding. For lower SES, you might not be able to breastfeed. There may be numerous reasons, but one could be if you're working 12 hours a day and you don't have time to prepare the milk and you can't have it to the daycare and things of that nature. So Oh, I think there definitely could be a connection between high SES and these benefits of breastfeeding. So something to think about. I guess in other words, one thing that I want to say there is that you shouldn't feel guilty if you are unable to breastfeed for whatever reason. On the nutrition, back to that, poor nutrition can lead to a number of problems that occur more often in low-income families. In the U.S., insufficient food is not the key problem. This is weird. Instead, it's unhealthy habits and being overweight that actually cause more problems for kids in America. So in other countries, the main problem is we don't have enough food. In the U.S., we have more than enough food. It's just we're not always able to obtain the best quality foods. Again, the number one vegetable for 2 to 3 year olds is French fries. So what they did was, I think it's a study in the UK, is they looked at the number one vegetable that kids like to eat, and they consider potato a vegetable. And so preparing it as a French fry, it became the number one vegetable. And so it shouldn't be a shocker that that's not going to be good for a kid long term. The children's eating behavior is going to be strongly influenced by their caregiver's behavior. A big topic that we'll talk about throughout this course is called modeling. And so kids are going to do what they see. And if they see you eating French fries all the time, then they're going to want to eat French fries all the time. When you are trying to direct their eating behaviors, you want to use a sensitive, responsive style as recommended. And you don't want to be forceful and restrictive in the behaviors, because that can contribute to a kid being overweight. So you got to be a little bit flexible on it, but you can't give in every single time either. And so yes, being overweight has become a serious problem for children in early adulthood. Research has found 45% of children's meals exceed the recommendations for saturated and trans fat, and that 1/3 of children's caloric intake comes from restaurants. So that's quite a bit. Further, 93% of the choices at the 13 major fast food chain restaurants exceed the recommendations for 1/3 of the daily caloric intake. So basically what they're saying is, if the vast majority of these restaurants, when you get yourself a kid's meal, it is going to exceed 1/3. It could be 1/2 of the calories that they're supposed to have for that day. So that's quite a bit. And as I've said several times now, being overweight as a child is linked to being overweight as an adult. And being overweight raises the risk for many medical and psychological problems. Both heredity and environment will influence whether children will become overweight, just like all the other topics that we talk about. It's a combination of the two. And yes, as I've said before, one thing to keep in mind is that you, the parent, you are in charge. You get to decide what the child eats, especially early on when they're 2 or 3. If they're not in daycare, if they're with you all day, you're the one making that decision. So you want to definitely set them on the right path. And while you're doing that, setting them on the right path, you have to kind of go down that path with them, because again, they're going to model the caregiver's behaviors. And so if you eat right, the potential for them to eat right is going to be higher. All right, that's for nutrition. On the next slides, we'll get into exercise.